Time is 2 o'clock. We call this Facilities Planning Committee meeting to order. Items for discussion, the 5-year plan. Previously, we discussed 8 items up for discussion, and we'll discuss 3 of those items. I'll turn it over to Dr. Edgar at this point to discuss alternative schools, early learning, and elementary instruction.
Okay, so the first thing on the list, the 5-year plan, what I wanted to gather from you guys is it's obvious that we have a lot of information that is out there. And I don't know, from the facilities committee standpoint, after we talk about number 3, I think we'll see that all 8 areas that were identified as priorities are important, and I think they all go together, but at the end of the day, some of them can't happen right now. And I'll explain the conversations that we had as an administrative team. There was somebody, I think it was Ms. Lanning last time, asked about what the administrators thought, and so we'll talk about that here in a minute and how we got to that point. But as far as a 5-year plan, I guess what I need to know from you, does everybody in the room or everybody on the committee feel like it's important for us to start talking about a 5-year plan? And if that's the case, then I need to get DLR back in the game. And I know that they had provided you with some information. The last couple meetings were a little bit awkward as to the way some of that information was presented. And I apologize for that, because we were just putting these committees back in place. And but I can get to the bottom of it and deal with it, and we can use these 8 priorities to develop start putting them together to develop a 5-year plan, and then we as a group can meet monthly and talk about where we want to go with each one of the items. So I guess what I need today is just kind of your blessing, if that's a priority of the committee in itself. You guys feel like we need a 5-year plan. I do. But I don't want to go waste a bunch of time if you don't feel like it's something that's necessary.
I support it. We do need a 5-year strategy and plan. We've got to know where we're going.
And it might even be, it might even be more than 5, to be honest with you, when you're talking about all of these 8, and I'll kind of go into detail in regards to why I think that here in just a second. But it very well could be 7, before you can get everything done. It kind of just depends on where you want to go. Okay, well, there's no other discussion about that. Item number 2 is deferred maintenance needs. There were some questions in regards to what we did as far as deferred maintenance. I know that the last time around, we talked about closing buildings, we talked about building schools, we talked about those types of things. And I wanted you guys to kind of understand where we were at, what we spent money on. I know it's a concern that if a building is being talked about, why would you dump a bunch of money into it? And I totally understand that. So I kind of told Mickey to put together, I believe he has a handout for everybody here. I'm going to have him go through this and just kind of explain what we have done over the last couple of years, where we're at with deferred maintenance, and how many dollars we're throwing at that. So Mickey, if you want to come up and run through this.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. Just kind of put this literature in front of you as a cheat sheet for me. This is kind of like our maintenance department in a nutshell, what we do on a daily basis or a monthly basis, or covered here overall daily maintenance, preventative maintenance, and capital improvement projects for the school district. First and foremost, I just want to praise our trades team and also our housekeeping facilities, because they do a great job keeping our buildings up and inviting to the public. So daily maintenance is my first topic. Is we work off a school due system that all of our maintenance requests all over the district, no matter what trade it is, will go into this system for work orders. This is anywhere from painters to plumbers to carpenters to whatever our scope of work that we have goes into this school due repair system. And what this does, this shows us needs in other areas in these buildings that we have to identify, doing work and keeping the buildings safe and for the kids. We also, and I kind of gave you an example on one of the thing of what a work order would look like. And put them in order, but you'll see it's like room call, repair, leak steam, fixed shop class. This is one of our HVAC technicians. This is his work ticket for per school itemized. And also provided a copy of Central. We had a steam line leak. We had to call out IHP to fix it. It shows what the problem was and how much that we spent on that repair. So I can pull these reports daily. I can pull them monthly, or I can pull them by annually to see how much that we're spending on the buildings for repair cost. Preventive maintenance is kind of big in our department, trying to keep all our mechanical stuff and systems up. As you can see, we have quite a few on this sheet that we do, and these are also through our school dude preventive maintenance program to keep on, so we can track these as well. A couple of these, as you can see, that we have grease traps and backflow testing that we are required through the city, and we do that in-house, and we provide that information to them. The third one is capital improvements projects, and this is the one that we're currently working on this year that I provided for you. These are the locations and the needs that we have for our buildings to keep them safe. As you see, the dollar amount adds up fairly quickly, but we usually have a 1.8 to a 2.5 million in CIP budget each year, so we kind of work off that. So that's pretty much us in maintenance side to make sure that we keep our buildings up safe for our kids. Does anybody any questions or on that?
Are you behind on any critical maintenance? You know, there's nice to have, there's should have, and then there's critical. Are you like asbestos abatement, for example, that's critical? Is there anything of that nature that's still being deferred?
All that's capsulated and we're good on that side. Our biggest problem and concerns probably would be our roofing projects at this point.
And one other thing that has been a concern of mine since I've been here is the Daikin units on the 2016 expansion of the HVAC projects, which would be the 6 schools that were identified first whenever we talked about using ESSER dollars for improvements. Those Daikin units need to go. We've continued to battle with those things. The service on them, TMI out of St. Louis and TMI out of Kansas City are the only 2 people that come out to see us, and it's very, very expensive. The unit at Bessie Ellison has never worked right. The unit at Spring Garden has never worked right. So, I mean, we're just continually battling, and I think there's 8 schools that we have those, seven schools that we have those units at. And I know 2016 wasn't a very long time ago, but I mean, we're dumping money into them right and left. We could be spending better money on something else. I mean, it's not a good situation. And so I told him for next year to start putting a replacement on those units in places, buildings that we know are going to be there for a while, that have never been talked about repurposed or anything along those lines. You don't want to go dumping a bunch of money into something that might be talked about closed or something along those lines.
How many schools with roofing issues do we have?
We tried to, I know this year we're going to do, we should have brought that this year with me. We're going to do Lake Track for sure is one. I wish I had my current one. Well, last year, what we're working on now is Fair Street, Genefield, and Bodie, and those are completed.
You said those are the ones that have issues, or those are the ones that are complete?
Those are the ones that are completed on this cycle, and now we're starting on the 23-24 cycle for next summer.
So which ones will be on the next cycle?
I don't have it in front of me yet. I can get you that information.
How's the roof at Bessie Ellison?
It's fairly good shape. Yeah.
Have we heard any more information about a collaboration to build a walkway at Pickett Elementary?
I mean, as far as the sidewalks are concerned,
Mhm.
yes, we were kind of waiting to see where the conversations would go in regards to repurpose of buildings. But yes, we're ready to roll with that from our side, for sure. And the city is willing to help us as well.
Does that help in terms of revenue or help in terms of pushing the project through as far as red tape or paperwork?
With the partnership with the city,
Yeah.
well, you almost have to have a partnership with the city, especially when you're coming back out towards the belt. They're the ones that can get you all the permits, and so they have to be involved in that. And we can pour sidewalks, but we don't have the ability to connect to highways and connect to parking lots and those types of things. So we'll need the city to do some of that stuff for us. And they seem very I mean, they seem like they would be very cooperative. They're ready to roll with us. It's a security issue at Pickett
Yeah.
and Pershing as well. Any other questions for Mickey? Okay, the next one's gonna create some questions and you can fire at me. Okay, the third thing is admin priorities. So you have a copy, piece of paper, it says this. It says SJSD Strategic Focus, November 21, 2022. So the question was brought to my attention, what does admin want? The answer is, I'm not sure. No, it's not. So what I did, with the help of Eileen and Dr. Lau, we put this activity together. And we all got in groups of 4 and 5, and we answered the questions down below, 1 through 4, and 4 has A through G. It was really good. I think they would attest to that. It was a good activity. In the beginning, it was kind of a little bit like, what's this guy making me do? And, you know, at the end, it was good stuff. But what we did learn is that all 8 things that were identified from the facilities committee are all 8 priorities that we feel need to be done in a certain amount of years. So with that being said, I'll just go in order. This is no order, it's just the order that's on the piece of paper. 2 new high schools, okay? As we discussed 2 new high schools, the things that come out of that is, right now, we don't have the body capacity to even put something on the ballot to have 2 new high schools. So if you don't have the bonding capacity, then why do we need to continue to talk about it? And so what we tried to do administratively, we tried to identify something that we could fix in 23-24. So I didn't have to be the superintendent that sits here and says, well, I'm going to do this, and don't do anything, okay? So that's kind of the end goal for us. The second thing was middle school, 6, 7, 8. That also probably would take a bond issue. It's not going to take something that has to deal with bonding capacity, but it's probably going to take something you have to put on the ballot. We didn't feel like we were ready to put anything on the ballot in April of 23, and so that one not got pushed down the list, but it just got put back. We have about $80 million worth of no tax increase bonding capacity, and with that, you could build a new middle school if you needed to. Am I sitting here saying that we have to build a new middle school to fix 6, 7, 8? No, I'm not at all. But there's going to have to be something done, some renovations, some upgrades. Something's going to have to be done to the middle schools in order for that to happen. We don't, and it's going to be millions of dollars, and we don't have that sitting there to do that right now. The third thing is boundaries to develop feeder systems. This was of high importance for everybody. We get it. I'm sure it's of high importance for everybody that's sitting in this room right now. We get it. But the issue is, if you're going to talk about changing facilities, you need to change boundaries 1 time. We don't need to be changing boundaries 8 times. So we have to get the plan in place before we start talking about boundaries. Once we have the plan in place, we stick to that plan. You can go change boundaries and they're changed forever. But as a parent, you wouldn't want to change boundaries for 23-24 and then we build a new middle school and then they change boundaries again because that changes everything, and then I think you're just bringing too much stress upon the people that has to deal with it. So boundaries of our importance, absolutely, 100% they are, but I don't know how you can go changing them now and then have them change them again in 24, 25, and then change them again in 25, 26, if that's what the plan is asking for. Early learning expansion, this was to the top of the list. It was either number 1 or number 2. So this is the one I kind of want to specifically talk about in more depth today. But with early learning, we've heard the Kmart idea. We've heard the partnership at the Sears building at the mall. And the good thing about doing this think tank activity, the negativity comes out. You start to think about what are the negatives that go along with what we're talking about. And I haven't had any more conversations with the owner of the mall at this point. Have reached out to a couple of people but have not heard back. So with that being said, the negativity to that is it's not ours. There was no option for us to buy that building, and so it was a lease option. I don't know that that would be a bad thing. I'm not saying it is a bad thing, but it's not ours. And we wouldn't control everything that happens with that facility. And I think in order to do something right, we need to be in charge of that. And so that's kind of where we landed on that. And we'll talk about the direction here in just a second. Athletic facilities is something else we're going to need $6 or $7 million to do. So that's another thing that has to go back to the ballot, right? Which could very well be fit into that $80 million if you ran on the no tax increase side. So you have your middle school, you have this. So you can see where that kind of partners together. It all works out at the end of the day. Elementary school assessment. This was something that was kind of low on the list, but became one of the priorities that I'm going to identify here in just a minute because it goes along with early learning expansion if you want it to be ours. And then the last one is alternative school, and that was the number 2 or number 1 on everybody's list. So early learning expansion and alternative school were number 1 or number 2 on everybody's list from an administrative standpoint. And we feel like we have a plan in place, or a working document in place to get a good plan for alternative education for 23-24. So what we can fix in 23-24 is the expansion of early learning, the restructuring of alternative education, and we can use elementary school assessment as a topic of discussion in order to get us to that point. So back to early learning. So what do we do to expand early learning if we want to be in control? Well, we need to look at repurposing a building or buildings. I don't know what that looks like, but I would like to have that conversation sooner than later. And so what I would like to do is, I don't think this is the place because I'm just throwing it at you right now, but right after the first of the year, I would like to have a work session with the Board of Education, with the members of this group right here, and with the administrative team. Get everybody in the room at the same time, hand out a couple pair of gloves, and we'll go at it and we'll see where we land. But I think, that's a joke, somebody's supposed to laugh. I think that, I think there is an end game with this. I really do. I don't know what the end game is, but we have ideas, we have a place. We've talked about those types of things, but the time is not right to release that right now. Yes?
I was just thinking, I've been kind of I've talked with Dave and talked to some other folks about this. Because I know that we don't have the bonding capacity to build 2 new high schools. I know that's been talked about a lot, and I know that the other group that we had a couple of meetings ago, they came in and said that was a priority also. Who was that group that they did the research?
DLR?
Oh, DLR.
Yeah. And then they said, again, so it's one of those things that's been a priority for a while. And this is just a thought. I'm throwing this out, and I know that there's no way to get everybody to agree, but it's a thought. With the $180 million, is that our bonding capacity?
Close.
Ish.
Yep.
If,
Now, but that's your bonding capacity, but you're also going to have to take a vote of $1.20 to the public in St. Joseph.
sure, no, yeah, I get it. If, and again, I'm just playing this out, and appreciate the time, just getting a little bit of time, but, and hear the whole thing. If we did the 180 million, and, because we've talked about the two high schools, and I'm just going to call them St. Joe South and St. Joe North, just for, so don't, I'm just calling them that. And you built St. Joe South, and that's what, 110 or 120 million? Something like that, probably? I'm guessing, is that kind of what we've heard, or?
I think DLR said, I believe, $100 million per high school.
100, so 100. I love the early childhood development. I think that's a top priority, right? So you take some of that money, and we worked with figured out early childhood development center, whatever that looks like, and the alternative school. I think that's another top priority that people have talked about. And you bought the land for St. Joe North. Again, just calling it that for argument's sake. That way you're not having to build two new schools at the same time. But if you built St. Joe South, you take it with some of the money, you address the alternative school, you addressed the early learning center, and you just bought the land for St. Joe North. Again, I just think that would give everybody in this town some vision and some hope. It would address, you said the early childhood and the alternative were like 1 and 2 priority, right?
Yeah.
So it would address our number 1 and 2 priority. We'd be down the road on these high schools that we've been talking about for years. And again, the DLR, we've been talking about it then, we've been talking about it for a long time. Could buy the land so people see, okay, here we go, this is where it's going to go. I know this is going to happen. Maybe it's not happening right now, but at least I've got some vision for it, right? To change just the whole perception of, I think it would just do a lot of things for our town. I know that's a big ask. I know there's a million holes to shoot in it.
No,
I just wanted to throw it out as something that I've visited with people about, I've been thinking about, and I think it would be, we have so much momentum, I feel like right now, with you guys, your leadership, the people that we have on the board, great people, great leadership, just in our whole town. And we've got a window to maybe do something really nice and really big, and we kind of need that, I think, for our town. Don't have to be a rocket scientist to kind of look at the trend line from the last census and what's happening in St. Joe.
Yeah.
And I think that would be, anyway, really great. Thank you for your time, for just a chance to mention that.
Well, and I think that makes a good point. And what that does take, it's going to take, to take the $80 million of no tax increase to even buy the land, to look at something like that moving forward. So that's the reason, that not to say that that wasn't a high priority, because it was actually number 1 priority in one of the groups, wasn't it? I think, yeah. So, but, as we talked about it, it was just something that we want to change in 23, 24. And if you look at repurposing buildings and we can make early learning happen right now, sure, would we want a facility that's great right in the middle of the town that costs $26, $28 million? But at the end of the day, when you look at those, if you look at those buildings and you just close them and you don't repurpose them, what are you doing to that area? Let's look at what happened around Humboldt. Let's look at some of those buildings that we have left vacant that we thought maybe we were going to sell. Some of them we did sell. Look at what happened around them. So if we can, I think we're looking at prospering the area a little bit. But the reason why they were identified, Dave, was because they were things that didn't cost anything and we didn't have to ask the public to do it.
And I think that is the most important part of this, is what can we do with the money that we have, with the property that we have, before we start going out and putting a tax on the ballot. This community has been taxed over and over and over again, and I know that they pass it, I know that everyone's voting for it, but I think to be able to show that we're good stewards of tax dollars, use the money that we have, the early learning center, we have the ESSER dollars for that. Alternative school, athletics, I think there are things that can be done within the funds that we have to be able to show that we're good stewards and then move towards that. I'm not saying that we would never get towards that, or that's not something we would ever do, but I think we just have to be make the changes we can make now.
And I think that's important to show the community that you're doing something to get to that point, because the end goal is all of these things on this list are part of that. Right now, anyway, I mean, we could show that. But yes,
If we spent $220 million and had 2 new schools, how much of that $220 million actually gets us something that we don't have now? Because we're still buying bathrooms, we're still buying staircases, we're still buying parking lots, we're still on that. We have that stuff. We have $80 million. What if we get those items that these new schools, the 15% more, you know, the commons grounds or a ball field or a fine arts facility, we could take that money and have those items in 3 to 5 years. And then it's not like they would never get use. We could have that by repurposing buildings, redoing some things, and we could still be a 15 to 20 year path towards new high schools or something like that. But, you know, our consolidation of schools needs to also get back to what's best for students, not what's best for builders, realtors, people from out of town. Our consolidation of schools, if we want to dig into some data, has equaled worse performance, worse attendance, and I cannot see a cost savings when you factor in the attendance, when you factor in the extra personnel in the larger schools. You go from a school with 1 principal, now you have a principal and assistant principal. I think we need to get back into what's best for students at each level. And that includes revisiting. Our weakness, everybody says, is we have too many facilities. We could turn that into a strength by repurposing facilities. And the 6th, 7th, and 8th, that's a problem we created. Yes, it needs to be addressed. But do we continue to go down the same path? Or do we look at it and say, hey, maybe we're better by repurposing 2 buildings and having 6th grade centers and make sure that the 6th graders are ready to go? But I know of the teachers that I talk to, the smaller schools that are K through 6 are having much less problems than the larger schools that are K through 5. And, you know, yes, 6th, 7th, and 8th might be the ideal model, or maybe it was 5 years ago, but the world's changed. We need to reevaluate that. But the reason we went 6th, 7th, and 8th was not for students. And I think we need to revisit that. And with the 5 to 7 year plan or 3 to 7 year plan, I also think that we need to have a 15 to 20 year plan. And if it could build off of that. Let's say we get all the things that we need to in this 3 to 5 year plan, and then we go build 2 new schools, 3, I don't know what the best thing is. But then you could build them, hey, we've got good football fields. We can get the building built. We don't have to put a new football stadium at this new field at this time. And maybe that would allow a new school being built in the future. Hey, we don't need to spend all 110. We can get the bones of it there for maybe, you know, less money and get going. But I think we need to, you know, a lot of these things that are accepted are just things that not really accepted. They've just been repeated a lot.
Mm-hmm. No, and I agree with the statement that you said about kids. And one thing that I would tell you from an administrative standpoint, as you talk about repurposing, that's exactly what it was about at the end of the day at our discussion, because it ended up, we talked about schools that I had never even thought about. Because the schools that we had thought about before, it's no secret, Pershing, those types of things, because it's small. But at the end of the day, is that what's right for kids? No, I think there's a better option for kids out there. So that's a discussion I kind of want to have in January, because I think what we have, it's going to get shot up a little bit, right? Somebody's going to be mad no matter what you do. But if you're doing it for what's best for kids, I think we have something that
Everybody will get on board.
everybody will get on board with.
But, and also, are our facilities underutilized because they're not capable of being utilized properly, or has it been a choice? Are we breaking something so we can close it? And it's amazing that where I teach Lafayette High School has survived as long as it has.
Yeah.
And I think that that says something about what the community wants, because Lafayette High School, I think our enrollment's 750 to 800, and it has been for a long time. We only have about 400 kids that feed through in our feeder schools. You know, we have no new houses, haven't had for, you know, except for Habitat for Humanity homes and lot splits and things like that. What is it that's causing those 400 people? And then people who don't want to be in St. Joe, they're not going to North Kansas City and Park Hills. They're going to Mid-Buchanan's. You know, the number of people who pay tuition to go to Mid-Buchanan or pay tuition to go to Savannah, those are where we're losing our core families. Those are where my friends that I grew up with and my former students who are starting families, that's where they're going.
And
Smaller
do you think,
districts, not
and do you
bigger.
think that some of that is also the uncertainty of what's happening here?
Absolutely.
You know, like there's,
100%.
at least if there was a plan, you
Yeah.
could get on with the plan.
And I
or
also
not
think
get on with the
and I
plan.
also think we shot ourselves in the foot when 5 years ago when we put ourselves down to try to get the levy passed at the time and the bond passed at the time. We told everybody how terrible things were, and I think people listened to us. So
Except our addition was built in 2009, and it is a Lafayette district. I think part of the challenge is that housing development in general in St. Joe's very limited across the city.
where do you live?
I'm in Greystone.
That don't count. Because when they send a bus to another school there, you can't call it a feeder school to that.
On paper, it is Lafayette, but
Yeah.
they send the
But in
kids to
general,
the other
there's
schools.
there's very limited housing addition going on. Housing development in town.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So as far as I want to make sure I understand. So the two new high schools, are we talking about a two high school model, or we're talking about replacing, like, and why was that a priority?
You know, that wasn't really identified because that question got brought up administratively. That was just what Mr. Foster had passed along to us.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's a two high school model or if it's two new high schools. That's a good question.
It was just one of the bullet points that came about from the first meeting that we had, two new high schools. And I'm assuming that just means kind of what Dave said, a north and south. And we go to two from three high schools.
Well, then where did that feedback come from, I wonder?
Well, that was amongst the group.
I don't think that was accurately documented. I think we talked about that when the group came and gave us what those committees kind of broke down, but there was so much similarity in, like, the top priority was a two high school model, and then the next closest one was keep all three high schools. They were very close. So I think that we talked about two versus three, but I don't think that the group identified a priority of 2 over 3.
I don't feel like we did. I would
No,
say that as
It
well.
didn't mean we made a decision on two high schools.
No,
It
but
just
I'm
No,
not
means-
I
saying.
think the presentation, I guess I'm a little bit fearful that right now, when you look at this, and part of it is community eyes on things, when you look at this, to me, it has a feel like we had some discussion and almost said, we need two high schools, albeit new, old, or whatever, and I don't feel like we have really vetted that out
That wasn't the
completely.
case.
Okay, and that's fair. And I think that was maybe what we just need to
Yeah.
get on the record to
Yeah.
say,
That
that
we're
even though
talking
this
about
says two, that's not really something that we have really dug into.
Yeah, that wasn't the
In-
case.
Well, the
My
Vision
thought.
Forward feedback got a lot of feedback, and there were mixed opinions throughout the
Right.
process.
Right.
But I guess what I would say, I think for the information that you collected and the way you put this together, I feel like it's a great strategy to really continue to work
Towards that.
through the progress we've gained, and then the things you still have outstanding to do to get where you ultimately need to be.
Sure.
And that's why when we took all 8 priorities, Whitney, you made the suggestion to pass it on to the admin, and that's what Gabe did. And,
No, I think it's good. I think it's something that we can take into a work session. I think just with that with the new high schools, it makes kind of like, what's that mean?
Yeah, I get it. And Leslie, I didn't know anybody watched from the community. I didn't know anybody paid any attention to that kind of stuff. I'm kidding.
Well, I think information,
Jokes are not in today.
They're really just falling.
the information that we got from Vision Forward, I mean, the statistics that we got were that I think Benton was at 60% capacity, and Lafayette was 55, and Central was 85. I mean, I don't even think that's sustainable, is it? I mean, I guess when we talk about,
Some of these things with boundaries and.
well, I mean, even if, I mean,
We'll plug that out.
those numbers don't even add up to 100 for 3 I. I mean,
You could
one's
also,
at 60, one's at
But we're not
55,
there
and one's at
yet.
85. I mean, that's not even a.
but again, you can repurpose buildings. You know, one study by, was it DLR, is this the last one?
Yeah.
Said that Lafayette could hold 1355, something like that.
It did.
And the previous study by BLDD had Lafayette at 10, like 1,040, 1,050. You know, a lot of these studies have good information in them, but the information needs to be vetted and tested. And a good example is Hyde Elementary School. The replacement cost of the roof down at Hyde Elementary School. And they talked about how expensive it was and how expensive it was. And I think it was, I don't know which one was, but they had it as replacing a slate roof, because that's what was on there. Well, a slate roof is not cost effective to replace, and that's not what we did. So there's a lot of things that need to be, I mean, really looked over with closely. But yes, they're under capacity. I would doubt we could fit 1,345 kids at Lafayette High School.
Sure, yeah.
Even during the heyday when it was packed at the seams, it wasn't close to that.
I'm just going on the
But yeah,
information that I saw
but-
at Vision Forward.
But I do think that there's areas of those schools that you could repurpose, you know, and before I would want to spend $240 million, what I would want is show me why this doesn't work. Show me why 3 of equal size doesn't work, where you could take it Central and take the freshman annex and turn that into this or that. Show me why, you know, show me why 2 might work, 2 with a, you know, I've even said 2 with a very expanded Hilliard Technical Center, where students could go take their core credits there across the hall or in a wing of tech, you know, Hilliard, to where those 2 schools would be of smaller size. If you're going to spend, and it drives my wife crazy, but if we're going to buy something new, we're going to exhaust if it's a big investment, we're going to exhaust every possibility before we spend money. And I think that that's what we should do. And
Well, and what are the best numbers for the kids? What is that number? And yeah, you can find studies on all different kinds of things, but there are some good bits of information out there. But when we say it's about the kids, what is that number? And how do we take that into account? I understand capacity in buildings, but in the cold light of day, what's right for the kids?
Well, Lindbergh had a higher capacity and we shut Templeton and that's not going super well.
No.
I think it was 1,200. I think is what come out. Was that right, Dave? And was it 1,200 was the,
Yes.
Well, but where did that come, I guess, and maybe a work session is good, because maybe we could talk about that, because I would love to learn more about all of this too. Because when I look things up and I try to study, Forbes has a really great study that they did about the impact of schools and communities, and their number was like 500. And they said small schools are great, and I mean, basically the opposite of, you know, small schools and small classes, and that is what builds a community, and so many people are going away from it, and that's Forbes. I mean, you can find lots of studies, but I do think we need to talk about those kinds of things and not just take, no offense, but anything just at face value, you know?
I think that would be more of a long-term plan anyway. The things what I see that we all at least agree on are alternative schools, early learning, and the possibility of elementary restructuring. And I think that's what Dr. Edgar's kind of getting at. Right?
yeah, and that's what I want to have the work session about. I don't want to have the work session about talking about 2 high schools or 3 or 4 or 1. I I took this job to make something happen, and the things that I identified with alternative education and expansion of early learning and repurposing elementary, we can make that happen for 23-24. I want something to happen. So,
That's what this is about, is educating the kids the best way possible. It isn't about buildings. It's about how do we improve the results. And you can say, well, why change? Well, I think we've demonstrated over the past X number of years, what we have today doesn't work as well as what we'd all like. We'd like things to be better. And it isn't even the size. I've read some of those articles on Forbes and the ideal situation, and I'm telling you, it isn't necessarily about size, it's about quality of education, what you're giving the kids, the resources devoted. And I know I'm a broken record, I'm an outlier, raise my hand, I'm an outlier. My oldest 4 boys graduated from high school with 1,000 kids in the class. In that high school, their post-secondary education level fell this past year from 98 to 96.6%, went on to college. Do not tell me a big high school stops education, it doesn't. It's the quality it's devoted. It's how we have teachers or resources. But I mean, we have to focus on, let's get the kids the best education.
But we have so many kids in our community and the demographics of our community that are on free and reduced lunch, that are experiencing trauma. So I think if we can do something where we have community-based schools with small class sizes, we're going to be able to recruit teachers better. I mean, we got to pay them. But all of this is a system, and it's all going to impact everything.
It has to start someplace. And in order to offer a better education, as Kevin says, to kids in the St. Joe Public School District, I'm 100% believe that if you fix early education, the kids are going to start with routines. Okay, those routines are going to carry over from 3 to 4 to 5. And guess what? We're not having to teach kids how to tie their shoes when they're 7. We're not having to teach kids how to go to the bathroom when they're 6. We're not having to teach kids how to stand in line when they're 8 because we got them early whenever they were 3. That's going to fix education because you're going to start teaching them how to read when they're 5, and then we won't be dealing with 24% reading levels in 3rd grade. And you fix the discipline issues, you get the discipline issues out of the classroom. We're not talking about 80% of the kids, we're talking about 5%. 5% of the kids, we're spending 95% of our resources on 5% of the kids. You fix that, that's how you fix education in St. Joseph School District. Early learning and discipline, period.
So for early learning, did they ever figure out kind of what size we even need? Because you said right now, like Lake Contrary is what, 38,000 square feet or something like that?
Yeah, so what we need, I think if we repurposed one elementary school and we got to 2 sites, leave the Lake Contrary site, you go to another one someplace, doesn't make any difference where, you're going to get close to covering a cohort. A cohort of students is about 800 kids, probably going to be a little less than that, so we're going to be close to covering the whole cohort for the kindergarten.
And that would be a cohort like a class?
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah. And so, to answer on square foot size, in order to serve 380 kids at Lake Contrary, that's the maximum capacity.
You know, the other thing I think we need to be mindful of is looking at this with an equity lens, because I think your facilities have limited that in the past, and your most glaring example is some 6th graders go to middle school and some go to elementary, but there's other examples throughout. I think if we look at not just what's right for kids, but what's fair for kids all across the city, that would be helpful too.
And in this repurpose, you actually look at, if you do everything at once, you're going to fix some equity issues at the elementary level. Not necessarily going to address it at the high school level yet, because you're not talking about boundaries, but you can fix some equity issues at the elementary level. It all works together, it does. Going to be some hard moves, but
there's 2 points I wanted to, having multiple sites for an early childhood factors in something that I don't want it to go overlooked, and that's the ease of people getting to in this community. It's 2 sites are going to be used more than one, and I can speak from experience, how hard it is to get your children to different places during the day. So I don't think 2 sites is bad. On the boundary issues, You know, it is a touchy situation, but in all my time of being in boundary issues, most students go where their friends go. And I do think that the boundary issues would be easier to transition is if you just changed feeder schools slightly, but still allowed those students to basically, they could go to the other middle school or high school, and in the short years, it would be, a lot of them would still, but after 3 to 5 years, most of them would go to the preferred feeder location. I do think that making more of a soft transition is more doable than a hard transition on that, because, you know, even early on, let's say 50% still want to go to school A instead of school B. In time, it changes. And most of those people, I've had former Lafayette people, they want to send their kids to Lafayette, but when it comes down to it, hey, all his friends are going here, all her friends are going there. So I think, you know, just kind of getting back to, on a lot of these questions, getting back to the human element of it, and thinking of those, the practicality.
You know, I've got just a general statement, and again, this is my second committee meeting, so I'm learning and absorbing, and you know, I see our 3 priorities that I think obviously we're focused on 23, 24. But just a general statement, and I'm not in our schools a lot, but I'm in our schools enough, whether I'm volunteering or going to a sporting event or what have you. And I'm a big believer in morale, huge believer in morale. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about 5-year-olds, 15-year-olds, or 45-year-olds. How do you feel about where you go to school, to work, to learn every day? And this isn't a statement against our staff, because I feel like we have wonderful staff members. But when I walk in some of our buildings, I mean, some of our buildings are, let's face it, they're old. They are. And so when you go into some of those facilities that aren't much different than when I went to school there 38 years ago, gave away my age, it's one thing from the student perspective, but it's also another thing from the teacher perspective. Where am I going to work or school or learn every day? And I just come back to, and again, I get short-term priorities and I get long-term priorities, but when we get into talking big dollars and cents, whatever the cost is for a new building, whether we're talking new high school, new elementary building, new whatever, I guess I love the pride in our community. I really do. I cannot imagine living anywhere else. But I just feel like when the conversation gets to talking new facility, repurposing, or improving what we have, I went to Central. Central was old when I went there. How old is the building now? 110 years old? I don't know if it's that old, but 10 years from now, it's going to be that much older. And I just, to me, I don't know why, for lack of a better term, I sense, this is going to sound bad, I just feel like every time the conversation new comes up, we're afraid to go down the line of what that looks like.
Do you think that the building's age is what's driving the poor outcomes and poor attendance?
I think facilities matter if that's what you're asking.
So I don't think that anyone here, and I could be wrong, but I don't think anybody's here saying that we don't want nice new things. But there are other pressing issues that are driving poor attendance.
Well, and I just made a statement again.
I get what you're saying. I think that being able to have difficult conversations is what's important for all of us. And I think that's why we've stifled progress forward, because we don't want to have difficult conversations.
Sure.
And Brett, I respect you, and
No, I didn't say that conflict
no,
to
I'm not
conflict
saying,
anything.
But that's what I'm saying is that I think that when we have kids who are acting violently towards their peers or their teachers, that's not a facility issue. When we're talking about kids that aren't coming to school and 50% of attendance or some abysmal number for kindergarten attendance, that's not, facilities aren't driving that. So I don't think that any of us are saying we don't want or need new facilities, but that's not, to me, that's not the most pressing issue that is a problem that we have right now. So I don't think it's that's.
No, and I don't disagree with you at all. And I totally am on board with Gabe saying that the alternative school and behavior and early childhood development, 1 and 2, right? I mean, we all agree, I think we're all agreement on that. 100% behind that. 100% agree with that. One thing I said last night at the board meeting from Vision Forward is we can't look at it as either or.
Yeah,
We're either concentrating on early childhood development behavior or facilities. It's got to be both and in our community. Both of these things need to go hand in hand, because I know that I talk with teachers and administrators, especially administrators. We can't fill good teachers. We're having a hard time getting teachers. We're having a hard time filling these positions at 3 different high schools. And so when we talk about is it good for kids, it is morale, it is having up-to-date facilities, but that and this isn't just a St. Joe thing, this is all over the country. We're having a hard time finding teachers, and I don't think that's going to get better anytime soon. So I do think this isn't just about nice shiny things, this is about what's best for kids. And I think there's issues with, can we sustain 3 facilities when they're at 60% capacity? Can we do, I know I talked with some of my friends, and it's a nightmare finding teachers to fill all these positions. And so I'm with you 100. I understand what you're saying, Whitney, and I'm totally with you guys. Early childhood development, behavior, attendance, those are top priorities, 100%. And that's Gabe and his staff and his crew and the board are doing a great job addressing that. It just needs to be both and, not either or. It needs to be that and looking at our facilities and being really mindful. And I agree with Brett says, Central's 100 years old. I mean, my daughter and son-in-law talk about moving back. Are their kids going to be going to a 120-year-old school? I mean, it's just, if not now, when?
Yeah,
and I guess that's what, if not now, when are we going to look
right?
at this?
I just don't think that the buildings are what are driving the problems. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't replace them.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that there's
bigger problems than buildings.
Community-based schools with small class sizes.
There's bigger problems with our schools than buildings. They're addressing the important stuff, but if we don't address these facilities, we've got some issues with people leaving our community, and that's part of the...
That's what Dr. Edgar opened up with. We need a 5-year, 10-year
Yes, and I agree with
strategy,
that.
and that's exactly
I
what
agree
this
with that.
facilities is only part of it. We
I
need
agree with that.
an overarching strategy, then as milestones on when we do get to facilities, when we do end up with needing to do something
Yeah.
like build a new school. Okay, it's coming. It's coming at some point, and that's where that strategy is important. Where does it fit? But we got to start with the kids and the better education and build out from there.
Yeah.
Either, do you have a comment?
Every time we go into the high school discussion, at least in the past, and I'm the senior member, I've been around forever, you're like a dog chasing its tail. Everybody, and not saying that in regard to you, sir, but I meant we just kind of all start going, no, 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 and nothing ever gets done. So I get why that needs to be in the process, but I really think that's way down the road. That's my 2 cents. Those buildings are old, and they don't build them like they used to. There I go, I started that, but whatever.
So to change the subject, from an alternative school standpoint, what's different? If you go to an alternative school versus an elementary school, per se, they have more counselors, they have a different disciplinary structure, they have that kind of stuff, but the actual facility itself, is it different?
You don't want it to be different.
That's right, that's what
That's the issue, and I think philosophically, maybe the beliefs were a little bit different in past administration, but we don't want it to be different. Dr. Gilpin's sitting in the crowd, and she would hopefully stand behind me on this deal. An alternative education setting has to be what's best for kids, and right now, it's not best for all kids in St. Joe School District, because we're allowing some of the behaviors to stay in buildings because our focus of what our alternative school is different than what it needs to be. And I say that, so it's more of a credit recovery type setting than it is a discipline structure setting.
Remedial.
And I don't want it to be a prison, that's not
No,
it.
yeah.
And we want to have transition plans for kids to come back. So if you're a level 1 offender and you go here, you have 1 month to come back. You transition back to wherever you came from. I get level 1 offender probably
I
didn't
think
sound
we
very
have.
good. We could use better verb. I get it. Down, look at her.
I think if we can look at it as like a rehabilitative,
Yeah,
intensive programming, smaller class sizes, smaller ratios,
More supports.
more supports, less penal colony.
And your statement early on about 5% of our students are taking 95% of our energy and resources, and that's a very true statement. And I know at the high school level, sometimes it is about getting credits, but for a lot of our strong behavior students, that moving over to an alternative setting and saying that you can come back if you do well, the one thing that, and people don't believe me when I say this, but the students who have some of the largest discipline problems, the one thing that they really want is to show up every day.
Yeah.
I mean, they really want to be there. Now, they're not doing a whole lot while they're there, but they want to be there. And if we could get that, a lot of times they will come back and, hey, I want to be here. So they might do the minimum, but they're doing a lot more than they were. So
that would be a 1st through 12th kind of situation?
I don't know. That's the discussion that we need
Right.
to have. Definitely 3rd through 12th, but not to say that you don't have those problems in K through 3 or 2. So there would need to be something built into the buildings. I guess it all depends on
Because didn't we have
the
that
facility in itself. It's only so big, right?
Right. Didn't we have that issue at Webster or whatever, that there were adults and young kids in the same building and the parents kind of flipped out?
Yeah, we don't have any of that.
No, not now, but I'm
Yeah.
saying if you did a 3rd through 12 kind of thing.
Yeah, we would
altogether.
have to structure it to where
Right.
one of them would be upstairs, one of them be down. And that's all, those conversations are all
Sure.
taking place, so. And just by going out to the middle schools, I was out to a middle school the other day, asked one of the principals, how many kids would you have to take out of your building in order to make it a real good learning environment for kids? 8. You have 450 kids in that building, 8?
yeah.
So let's do it, Go to another middle school, maybe 7.
Right.
And they know,
Sure.
Hey, here's a side question. What percentage of these kids are K through 3? I would think that the percentage is lower.
Well, if you expand early learning, you won't have that many in K
That's
through 3
right,
because
that's
you'll
right.
fix the routines in the beginning.
Right.
They learn how to behave.
Right. Well, you
Before
them
they
into
get to 3rd
routine.
grade.
You get them into, I go to school every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think some of that, it is that easy, but it's also not, because a lot of these kids have mental health issues, they're in houses with substance abuse going on, and just to be, in the Vision Forward, I saw where it talks about partnerships with local businesses and things like that, but we don't have any pediatric mental health providers, very, very limited. Most of our kids are having to go to Children's Mercy with really long wait times. So I think, it's going to take more than just the early learning. We're going to have to figure out how to improve some of that. But I think your K through 2 are probably like the ones that are really acting out, that are throwing over bookcases and being super naughty. A lot of that's mental health and, development issues. Trauma.
And so there is a percentage of those kids that probably could go to an alternative school too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But would you say that percentage is lower?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about less class sizes. I mean, you're talking K through 2, so it's going to be less anyway.
So that, basically that one repurposed elementary school would take care of that then, is what we're saying. There wouldn't be that many numbers at an alternative school, basically.
I think Webster, we can we can use Webster as our alternative school and make it work.
And that would work, right? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was curious. We're not gonna need multiple sites or, you know, that kind of stuff, right?
No, just a one repurposed building for early learning.
For the early learning.
Right now.
For the early learning expansion, are you talking about expanding slots and service hours? And that you think you'd be able to do that by August?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you go up to how many? You go
That
up
would
to-
be, that would have to be a discussion deal, or you're gonna have to help me. But, we had talked about going to full-time.
Which means what for you?
Well, full day rather than half day.
2:30?
So an ADA classroom would be, it's not quite the same length as an elementary, but it gets out just a little bit earlier. It comes a little bit late in order to count for ADA. So we would hope to open some ADA classrooms, which we currently don't have, where we could get the, average daily attendance rate. Possibly some title, which would, again, if those funds were available, we would, in order for it to be a full day, we'd have to offer some before and after school childcare, which we currently do not offer.
Right. Yeah, I think that's gonna be important for people to be able to use it.
Yeah. So it all has to go together, and that's why we would like to have that discussion, a work session to kind of talk all that stuff out and see what direction we want to go. Because we can use a hybrid model, we can have some of them go half day, some of them go full day, and transportation becomes an issue, and childcare obviously becomes an issue. We just want it to be what's best. But it would double the offerings, to answer your question, of what we're doing right now.
Well, we have 3 topics for the work session. On the
You
5th,
ready to schedule it? 5:30 on the 5th? January 5th at 5:30 right here.
Is there any information we need before that we don't currently have, or?
I don't think so. We'll have everything there that we need.
So are you doing one of these topics at a time? Is that what you're saying at your work session, or you're going to do them all?
Well, we're going to try to talk about all of them.
Knock it out.
I don't think alternative education will take very long. I really don't think any of them will take very long. But I'm pretty optimistic. I don't know.
Is that another joke?
No, that was wasn't.
That was supposed to be serious.
They all like land the same.
They all land in the same spot.
What's the third one after?
Nothing. The elementary realignment goes along with the other two. So it's really just 2 with one, with the elementary realignment being part of it. I guess to answer your question, it depends on how deep we get as far as elementary alignment is
So what you
concerned.
said today, I think, is that early education, the alternative school, those are your first 2 priorities.
Yeah.
Elementary alignment.
And then elementary alignment will be tied to that.
Then elementary alignment. So that's what your work session you're going to start with.
Yeah.
And then how you continue the facilities conversation, how?
Every month. At the next facility meeting, we'll talk about that.
Can we?
But I think we need a work session, because if we're going to do something with realignment, if we're going to do something with repurpose, then we owe it to the public for them to know what's going to happen. I don't want it to be a secret. We're not going to make the announcement in April. I want to make the announcement in February if we're going to do it. If not, we'll move on to the next, count it as one of my failures, and we'll go on to the next thing.
Can we talk a little bit about what information or data we would want to see prior to the meeting?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that we're not having all, just to, because if we're going to start at 5:30 p.m. Just love you guys.
what would you like to see?
There was a great graph that had building enrollment and capacities. You know what I'm talking about? But I didn't see it for the elementary schools. I saw it for middle schools and high schools. I didn't see the elementary schools.
Taking notes.
It exists.
I know it does, I just haven't seen
Is
it.
that a DLR thing?
So I think if we could just have some
It
sort
was
of
DLR.
packet.
They had that whole packet, middle schools, elementary, high schools, they had it all and all the, along with boundaries.
It's
sir.
on the website.
Yeah, I think so.
I just think if we can have like a packet that goes out prior to that meeting, everybody's gonna read it, and then when we come, we can say, oh, okay.
What would be the criteria for which school to choose? Are you talking about the lowest enrollment, the neighborhood, the building level? What requirements are there for pre-K? Don't they need to be on one level and have ADA and all that?
You want to answer that?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things as far as for early learning is the location would be important because right now we are on one end of town, right? So we're in the south end, and so ideally we would either look at the middle of town or, somewhere to start thinking about dividing up the community. Ideally, the more classrooms on one level, the better for little ones. We would want to be able to mirror services. So if we have special education one, we want to have special education the other. So room for therapy and things like that. So really just layout space, outdoor, just like anything that a student might.
One thing, Lisa, that brings up a good point, and I think I had stated earlier whenever we were talking about one of the buildings, but, if it's about kids, then, we like to think we offer a, quality education to every kid. That's what we're here to do, but we would like the student to receive a like education. So, I think that's important. You don't want it to upset the education and make kids go backwards by any means. So that's part of the conversation too.
Any other questions or comments?
Recommendations at that meeting for the school assessment realignment? You have recommendations from your staff on what they think is the right thing to do?
Yep.
I think that as we proceed, I think we really need to emphasize the simple question that I do think that we've overlooked is, how is this better for students and families?
Yep.
And I think that needs to be first and foremost, because even if someone disagrees with the plan, the specifics of the plan, but this is going to be all right, maybe they don't support it, but they don't fight it. Mm-hmm. And how is this going to be better? And I was going to stop by the board meeting last night and rail on one thing, but it's just a simple fact that I think we need to focus on our product. And that is, our product, in my opinion, is not an education. Our product is our environment and our opportunity that we can provide. And I would like to see each one of these steps, each one of these work sessions, or if we do want to repurpose, how is this going to be better? And that should be at the first of everything, because, we can, I think we've manipulated a lot of statistics in the past to support what we've wanted to do. And I also think that we should look at what we've done in the past and use that to predict, is this going to be another good step? Is moving like we did down in this scenario, how has that worked out? How many years did that take to work out, if it does work out? So that would be something I'd really like to see, is first and foremost, how is this better?
I think that's easy to prove with the three choices that we picked. Early learning is obvious, alternative school, less disruption in the classroom, and elementary restructuring, that'll be defined in the future.
Well, but how, I think what Jeff's saying is like, how, when we make that decision, how is what is best? So like I would have, if we're talking about putting 800 kids, no offense, in the Sears building, I don't know that that's what's best for kids, and there's a variety of reasons for that. But I just think whatever we decide, we have to be able to tie it back for how is it equitable? How is, there's kids at Lake, now there's kids, either in the Midtown area, the North Side, like those types of questions answered.
Yes, ma'am.
Are we needing any more information gathered in order to do the work sessions? Because that's immediately after the new year.
I don't have
Is there
anything.
enough time to get everything all together?
Yeah, I don't have anything to do. Just a break, right? No, that was a joke again. But actually, I'm going to send
Don't get his day job, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to send a meeting invite to these guys for the 2nd. We'll have it to you by the afternoon of the 2nd.
For the alternative school,
Work hard on the 2nd.
can we just get an idea what the alternative
Yeah.
school, like what the eligibility?
Like writing, the eligibility.
Yeah, just like a one pager, doesn't have to be anything crazy, but just like how are they eligible and what kind of the ratios?
Yeah, we'll get you a one pager for the alternative school, and then we'll get you like building capacities and all that stuff for all the elementary schools. I'm just gonna give you elementary schools because that's all we're gonna discuss, so there's no reason to pass the
Do you
rest of
think
it.
sure that point system is part of it? Remember they did the point?
Yeah.
It had with capacity, location, boundaries, age, utility maintenance, and they had a point system, and that was very insightful.
Okay.
Do we have
Do you think the history of the alternative schools in town would be helpful? Because people probably, a lot of people don't remember when it was
That's
at
a good point.
the mental hospital and why that closed and what changed and
So like the history of the
of how.
alternative education schools?
Has it,
Oh, okay.
how it's evolved through the same.
So what happened, why'd they go out of the Colgan Center, is it, okay. Yeah, we can make sure that that's.
Do we have too, just for curiosity, like each school boundary, do we have a rough idea of like what the city says, the number of kids that are actually there, whether or not they go to the St. Joe School District or not? At an elementary level, do we have a rough idea? Like, are we capturing 85% or, you know, in some places and 60% in others, or is it, you know what I mean, like?
Yeah. You know, I don't know.
I think that's a tough one because
Right.
you don't know where they
right,
are.
that's-
Yeah.
right. So how are you gonna do elementary boundaries if you don't know what's there,
We could,
you know?
You just go off of that. All we
Unless they
have is
were
like
born
that deal we
when
did in
there's no-
2019, the demographic study.
Right.
But they don't know, I mean.
They're guessing too, right?
Right.
I just didn't know if we had any more accurate information than that.
I don't think the city would know anything either.
we could figure it out.
Just the last census.
I mean,
How
yeah.
far down does the census tract get you?
Well, if they didn't.
It
fill
would
out,
be-
they
it
didn't
would-
know about it.
Right.
They
Yeah,
did it.
that's
They did
100%
have
true.
it from
It's
what
been
they
done
did.
before, it's been done before a long time ago. There was a big map on a wall and little push pins for
Well,
where every
remember
kid
when they
lived.
did the redistricting? But that was like.
That was DLR.
No, I mean the city council districts.
Oh.
But I think that was just an estimation based on how.
It's all based on
I think
the
that was
census.
I guess the boundary conversation would happen after the elementary restructuring.
Right.
So after this work session, we'll probably start that
I
conversation.
just didn't know if we needed to get started on
But
that,
it's a
see
good
if we could
question.
find that, you know, or we could get at least a reasonable guess.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, Mr. Reed.
Just in reference to the early childhood, maybe I missed it, but I hope not. What I want to eliminate with early childhood is, we know we have a wait list, right? And I want that wait list eliminated. The idea that 200 or 300, 400 kids are waiting to come to our preschool, that needs to be fixed.
Well, that's.
I don't want there to be any wait list to come to our
But I
early
think
childhood.
that part of that is that wait list, not all of those kids, like they've filled out the information. Some of them have gone other places. I mean. some of
I don't
them
want a
are-
wait
sorry,
list.
some of them
I don't know what
question,
you're
I
coming
guess.
up with. I don't want the wait list anymore in our district. I want early childhood to be available to every single kid that wants it.
So I know what the question is.
And right now, it's not.
So it's also looks different if we're looking at 3 and 4-year-olds, or if we're just looking at pre-K, which is, you know, the year before kindergarten, so number-wise. So originally, I think Dr. Edgar had talked about a cohort, you know, so even if we did a mix around, you know, between 700 and 800 students is kind of what I'm trying to plan for. But if the direction was to go more with 3-year-olds, that would look a little different too, more 3-year-olds.
And that would cause some issues for some other people.
Right.
DLO.
That's why I'm asking. So right now, that's not where we're, you know.
Thanks.
390 at Wake, and you just said that, you know, we're going to go to Sears and put 800 kids. Over half the kids in this district aren't having an opportunity to go because we don't have the room for them. We have to say no to them. I don't want to have to say no to any early childhood by next year. Gabe, by next year.
But then, okay, then this is where we kind of get on a tangent. But I think that there's a whole early learning system that will be completely upheaved, I don't know, there's a word for it, like that will be messed up if the school district goes to that. So I'm not saying that universal pre-K is.
So you're saying that your organization can service all these kids that
No,
they're talking
I'm
about?
saying that if you look at private pay, if you look at kids that need home-based, if you look at PAT and Easter Seals, there has to be a system. It's just like every other system. There's a lot of different players that you're talking about, that if the school district goes to 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, it will put some of our private childcares out of business. And there's a whole, that's not what we want to do, because then nobody has any other options.
We want them on our team.
No, they can afford to go there, they can still go there. I'm talking about the 400 kids that aren't having an opportunity right now that I want changed by next year, Gabe.
It would be interesting to know how many of those
Have no other option.
how many of those students that are receiving those items would possibly change, and how many are unable to afford that? Because
Most of them
yeah, because
able to afford it.
as most people know, the cost is a major factor in anything to do with early childhood, from from daycare to learning, and some of that's kind of a hybrid. And I know from just family members, a lot of people who would go, that don't go to one of those services that would go to.
Yeah, and my point is this, like, I completely agree with you, Kenny. Like, there needs to be an option for every single child. Just moving the school district to taking that role will cause issues for other providers. So I just think it has to be strategic, and it has to be in partnership with those other groups. That's all I'm saying.
Well, it sounds like.
I don't think it should be a concern, though.
It has to be a concern.
No,
It's a whole
our
system.
goal is to have nobody on the wait list. That's our goal. All these other things you're throwing in are derailing the importance of everybody having an opportunity. We're telling 400 kids, no. I want that changed by next year, Dave.
Okay. Merry Christmas. Meeting adjourned. See you guys on the 5th.
Thanks, guys.
Happy New Year.